Rabbi Chaim Seidler Feller recently celebrated his 40th year of working with students and faculty as the executive director of the Yitzhak Rabin Hillel Center for Jewish Life at UCLA, currently the Director Emeritus at Hillel and a senior scholar at the Shalom Hartman Institute North America, was ordained in '71 by YU, where he completed a master's in Rabbinic Literature, has been a lecturer in the departments of Sociology and Near Eastern Languages and Cultures at UCLA, and in the Department of Theological Studies at Loyola Marymount University, where he taught a course together with a Muslim colleague on Judaism and Islam. He's also a faculty member of the Wexner Heritage Foundation, was the founding director of the Hartman Fellowship for Campus Professionals, and a founding member of Americans for Peace Now. In 2014, he initiated a fact-finding mission for non-Jewish student leaders to Israel and the Palestine Authority, which is now offered on 60 campuses across the country. The International Hillel Center has granted Chaim the Hillel Professional Recognition Award for blending the love of Jewish tradition and the modern intellectual approach of the university. He was a rabbinic consultant to Barbara Streisand during the making of the film Yentl, and he's got his publications, and he has a number of publications. Today's event is very exciting, a virtual tour of the Seidler Feller collection of objects of Jewish material culture from Alsace and Iran, from India and Italy, and from the US and Israel. Items include an 18th century embroidered Italian tallit, a Yemenite wedding headdress, ketubot from across the globe, and contemporary Israeli silver. The tour will include a reflection on how we came to collect Judaica and the stories that background our acquisitions. This is actually relevant if you followed the Michael Steinhardt news recently and how we think about the ethics of Judaica and of artifacts. And it's always relevant as we expand our notion of Jewish history, our notion of Jewish peoplehood, and understand also that we shouldn't only privilege books. We shouldn't only privilege books. Many people who are either not literate or are less literate than scholarship understand their stories through stuff. And so to be a more egalitarian network, we should understand the world and stories, not only through books, but through stuff. So with that, my teacher, who I was privileged to spend 2 years as the senior Jewish educator for, under he's a walking Torah, Rabbi Chaim Seidler Feller.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shmuley. Yeah, you're making me think about the significance of stuff. Yeah, we were talking just before about abundance and sufficiency. So that's a question. So one of the points that I want to make today is that Doreen and I are modest collectors. We, in many ways, I sort of fell into it. We fell into it. And I want to sort of emphasize that you don't have to be a major art aficionado with enormous resources to gather beautiful items that help you celebrate your Jewishness. Now, I want to ask, I have some feedback. Are you all, is there feedback for everybody? No, okay, excellent. Okay, all right. I'll survive. So I do want to say a few introductory words about Jewish art, Jewish ritual art, and in the course of my presentation, which will involve initially studying a text and then walking around to tour our collection, I'll be able to tell you the story of how we started collecting. Okay, so what I want to say in introducing Jewish art are the following ideas. Number one, Jewish ritual art represents the triumph of Jewish culture over the adversity of history. That's always striking to me. No matter how much we suffered, and no matter how the persecution, we not only wrote books, as Shmuley said, we also designed items that enhanced our religious experience. Right? That was always important. When students, get a sense of what Selo Baron used to call the lachrymose theory of Jewish history, that Jewish history is just a veil of tears. So I always point out to them, if that's all we were doing was crying, then how do we get all these books that were written over the centuries? In other words, culture thrives throughout the ages. Mostly. Maybe I'll tell you a story. So much so that when the survivors found themselves in DP camps, and they didn't have svarim, they didn't have books, right? So the American Army and the Vaad Hatzalah printed Talmud and all basic Jewish texts for them. And I have one of the volumes that was printed in 1946 in Munich, by the American Army. I have another volume with a page dedicated to Truman, thanking him for the fact that their books were given back to them. So in the Talmud, in the verso, in the page after the title page, there's a dedication, and the dedication says, the Nazis not only wanted to kill our bodies, they wanted to kill our souls. So they burned our books, and when we survived, we had no resources. And now, thank God, we've been given a lifeline, because we once again have the sources of our tradition with which we can engage. So I want to say this was always significant. No matter what our experience is, we had our books, and we even designed objects, beautiful objects, in the camps. In Terezin, they made Seder plates. After the war, the Joint, together with survivors in the camps, produced, we have one of them. If I remember, I'll show it to you. A Seder plate that was produced by survivors who went me'avdut lechairut. Literally, they went from servitude to freedom. And their expression of avdut lechairut was in producing Seder plate for Pesach. Right? That's the concretization of an idea. Number one. Number two, art and beauty are a significant part of religion, not divorced from religion. In other words, I know that the aesthetic isn't always nurtured in the intellectual tradition, but we know how important it is. And I think that part of the reaction also was in Christianity, where the material culture and the flesh was so significant. So Judaism reacted in a way, and we have this sense that we're much less committed to that form of expression. And you see, by the way, you see the tension in My Name is Asher Lev, Chaim Potok's book. Right, basically, it's a story of a Chabadnik who becomes an artist and gets permission from the Rebbe and so on. It's a wonderful story. I think it's his best book. And recently, there was an article in the foreword, I think it was in the foreword, about Haredi artists. And for a long time, there have been Haredi poets. You can't have a living community without its artistic expression. You know who knew all this? You know who wrote about this? Mordechai Kaplan. Mordechai Kaplan imagined an inclusive Judaism with a variety of expressions of Jewish ideas, Jewish concepts. Finally, what I want to say is one of the consequences of collecting is that you basically surround yourself with living Judaism. And it's really, you'll see in a moment, it's magnificent. All right, so any questions so far? If there are no questions, I'm going to share my screen. So this is a Gemara about Hiddur Mitzvah, about beautifying the commandments. All right, it's a Gemara in Tractate Shabbat. I'll read it. Now, what is the source for the requirement that a mitzvah must be performed in the most pleasing aesthetic way? The source is, this is my God and I will glorify God. It's a verse in the Song of the Sea. Ze Eli va'anvehu, I will glorify God. as it was taught in a Braita with regard to the verse, this is my God and I will glorify him, God, the Lord of my father, and I will raise God up. The sages interpreted anvehu homiletically as linguistically related to noi, beauty. Anvehu, you can hear it, noi, and interpreted the verse, beautify yourself before God in mitzvot. Even if one fulfills the mitzvah by performing it simply, it is nonetheless proper to perform the mitzvah as beautifully as possible. Make before God a beautiful sukkah, a beautiful lulav, a beautiful shofar, beautiful ritual fringes, beautiful parchment for a Torah scroll, and write in it in God's name in beautiful ink with a beautiful quill and by an expert scribe, and wrap the scroll in beautiful silk fabric. So there's a mitzvah to enhance your religious life, that the ritual object actually has an impact on you, on your connection to God, on your connection to the world, and your awareness that the world itself is filled with beauty. But beyond that, there's a second interpretation that I want to link to the first one, even though it's introduced as an alternative. Abba Shaul says, V'anvehu, he doesn't interpret it as having to do with beauty, with noi, should be interpreted as if it were written in two words. Ani vahu. Anvehu, I and he, I and God, me and him. Be similar, as it were, to God, the Almighty. Just as God is compassionate and merciful, so too should you be compassionate and merciful. This is actually a very profound theological comment. I'll take a minute, because what it's saying is that the very context, the Song of the Sea, which is the greatest example of God's miraculous intervention in history, becomes among the rabbis a source for our taking responsibility. We know that God split the sea, but God ain't going to split the sea any longer. From now on, we have to be God-like in the way we behave. We have to become God's agents, and we have to become God's partners. We represent God in the world. So I want to say that if we become God's partners in part by bringing more beauty into the world. So ritual objects is a model for how we should behave as human beings in the world. In the same way that mitzvot give us an opportunity to create beauty, because that allows us to be devoted. It intensifies our devotion. So too should we be creating beauty all around us, beauty in our relationships, beauty in nature around us, so that and beauty doesn't mean spending a lot of money, right? There's beautiful behavior also. If we understand it in those terms, we see our role in surrounding ourselves with the best possible expression of who we are and what we can do in the world. Okay, this is basically my introduction, and now I'm going to switch to my phone and we'll walk around, and hopefully you'll be able to see a selection of what we have. Okay, so let me close my screen.
All right, my friends. So now we're going to take a little journey. So first of all, aside from my busy desk, so this is my library. So when I say surrounded, I thank God that I had this opportunity, and I have these resources. It's a gift. It's a great gift. So let me give you a broad scheme of what there is. So this is one room, and you see objects. We'll hopefully get a chance to look at them, the ketubot in the corners, the hanging lamps, etc. The plates on the wall, so on. Surrounded indeed. And this is our den. That's the tallit that we're going to comment. Here are some books. I don't know that we're going to have a chance because in addition to ritual objects, I also have old Jewish printed books from the 16th century, and some really interesting items. But we won't have time for everything, so maybe we'll continue it another time. And I'm going to start here in our living room. Right. So first, I want to comment on our entryway. So you enter into our house, and one of the first things that you see beside the door is this hanging piece. This is designed by David Moss. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him in a moment. And what it says is Pitchuli Share Tzedek Avovam Odeya. You can see, I don't know if you can make out the writing, right? It's a gate. It's a gate with a verse, open up for us the gates of righteousness. I will enter through them and thank God. Avovam Odeya. Right. So David Moss was started out his career as a calligrapher of ketubot. He single-handedly reestablished ketubah illumination as an art form in the 70s. We had sort of abandoned it and lost it, and he developed that sort of expertise. And then at some point in his career, he was commissioned to make a Haggadah. If we have a moment, I will show you a facsimile of the manuscript that he created. It most probably is the most beautiful or creative Jewish manuscript in the last 500 years since printing. I mean, there are not too many manuscripts that we make, but it's magnificent. So he continues to produce different items. We are members of his minyan, which has an interesting beginning, but that's not the point. We subscribe to his productions every year. Every year he makes he's able to create a few items. We don't have any room any longer. We're donating the items at this point. All right, so that's the entry into the house. As you enter into the living room, we encounter this rug on the floor. This rug was made in 1930 you can see that it's a Bezalel rug, Bezalel Yerushalayim. You see also that the theme are menorot. There are the menorah. Everywhere there's a menorah, right? And the carpet is dedicated Eretz Hatzvi. It's hard to read the Hebrew. The land of the heart. The land of the heart, of course, is the promised land. It's Israel. So it's the carpet of entry, the land of the heart. There's something about it that gives me a sense that, of the presence of Israel in our midst. Now I'm going to tell you how we began. We have a wall in our living room with Roman Vishniak photos. Book that Vishniak produced. Vishniak was a photographer who in the 30s traveled through Eastern Europe with a premonition that this was a world that was going to disappear. And he documented life as it was, especially in the outlying villages, and with and had a great eye for people's eyes. Vishniak, I had brought him out to speak at Hillel numerous times, and at one point he asked Doreen and myself, we used to visit him in his apartment in Manhattan. He asked us to do some work for him, and he said, look, I can't pay you, but when you're finished with the work, you can go to such and such a place and choose some items. So I was struck when we visited Vishniak by the amulets that he had in his collection. He had silver amulets. And for me, I was a yeshiva bacher. We didn't know that Jews made amulets. We didn't know that. What kind of magic? We don't do that sort of stuff, right? So he said, go to this such and such a place. So the place he sent us to was actually Moriah Gallery. It was at that time the leading Judaica gallery, maybe the only one at that time. It was on 47th Street in Manhattan. And I found some, not silver amulets, but parchment amulets that were fascinating to me. And that was the beginning of our collection. Really, Vishniak sent us, and we were introduced to Peter Ehrenthal, the silversmith, who had founded this gallery. And that opened up a world for us that we really were not familiar with. And then it grew from there. I'm going to show you The amulets that I bought at that time, I think, are in New York, but I'll show you some amulets that we have now. They're relevant to our presentation today. So this is the Vishniak wall of Vishniak photos. Here is another item that was very that we were able to acquire at the beginning of our collecting. Now, can you see it? Is it visible to all? Yes, right? Can someone shake their head or let me know?
Could you possibly turn your phone horizontal so we get a better view? Thank you.
Is that a better view?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You'll be my my person here. So this is a shiviti. All right. This piece we found on the floor of the synagogue in Kolin, 40 kilometers east of Prague. It's the town from which Doreen, my wife's great grandparents and grandparents came from. We were there with a high school teacher who was not Jewish, but every summer took his students to repair and renovate the Jewish cemetery. This was in 1980, and he had the key to the synagogue. We walked in the synagogue was a wreck, holes in the roof, water on the floor, sidurim covered in ash, the back of the synagogue being used to store communist banners. And there was this piece that was all ashen. You see that it's dark, still dark in places, although we had it cleaned. And I said to myself, this is crying out to be redeemed. I don't know how legal it all was, but this connection that we had. I don't, Shmuley mentioned Steinhardt. I'll tell you what we hope to do at some point, because there have been a lot of renovations in the Czech Republic in the last 10 years. We will donate this back to the Czech Republic because we know that it can be preserved in good condition. When we took it, there was no chance that it would be preserved, and we actually we had, as I said, we had it cleaned. Let me tell you a little bit about it because it's so interesting and instructive. This is a shiviti. It hung in front of the prayer leader, in front of the chazan. What you have the menorah on the center. The menorah is a focus of meditation. There's a psalm with 49 words that's written around the menorah, and Lamlatzeach b'neginot mizmor shir, and that becomes a focal point for sort of Kabbalistic intentionality and unification. Above the menorah, you have a real interesting chart. The name of God, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, spelled out. The letters are spelled out in different ways. The Hey and the Heys and the Vavs can be spelled differently, and those different spellings yield a different power. And that power, 72, 63, 45, and 52, those powers reflect different aspects of God's presence, and that we can connect to through our actions or our meditative abilities that we can activate. So there is a little bit of magic involved in Kabbalistic thought and our capacity to have an impact. It's called theurgy. We have an impact on the divine through our actions, through our meditations, through contemplating. In fact, here you have a great example. You see this sometimes in Sephardic, in Sidurim from the Sephardic world, where the name of God, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, is intermingled with Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud. So that's a writing, that's a unification, because the different aspects of the divine, the masculine, the feminine, they're brought together in wholeness. Right? On this particular shiviti, there are two interesting things I want to show you. First of all, in this corner is the Hineni prayer that most of you or many of you are familiar with from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's the devotional prayer of the Chazan, asking permission to lead the service from the community. And then a famous line that was introduced by Isaac Luria to be recited before prayer. It's a most wonderful, wonderful prayer. I'm praying to God. And the first thing I do is I say, I hereby dedicate myself and devote myself to fulfilling the mitzvah of loving my neighbor as myself. That's what it means to pray to God. to love my neighbor as myself. Wow. All right. So this is the Shiviti. Now, on the same wall, let me show you a couple of other items briefly. I can't spend as much time on all items. This is a Torah mantle from. I'm sorry. This is a Torah mantle. What's the best way? This is a Torah mantle from Prague. I think the date is 1757, and what you see here is a beautiful silk damask. The Prague was a center of trade in Europe, and as the Gemara says, the community used their most beautiful items to dress the Torah. They did so. They produced beautiful Torah mantles in Prague and also in Italy as well. And this was an area in which women could demonstrate their devotion because they were the main designers. This is a tallit bag from Morocco, a classic with the name of the owner of the bag, the owner of the tallit, Moshe HaKohen, and then followed by the two letters Sat, Samach Tet Sfardi Tahor, a pure person of Sephardic background. This piece most probably dates from the early 20th century. Right now, on this wall is something really interesting, hanging on near the rafters. This is called a wimple. I don't know how many of you know about a wimple. The wimple was used in Northern Europe, in Alsace, and in Germany, in Holland. You find them, and in Italy, different forms, but not like these. The wimple was actually made up of the swaddling cloth that was used to bring the child to the circumcision. And after the circumcision ceremony, the cloth was divided and sewn together in pieces, right? And then either embroidered or painted with the name of the child, which you see here, Yisachar Bereb Mordechai. I don't know if you can read this at all. Didesheim. So it was an Alsatian name, Didesheim. Nolad was born b'Mazal Tov Yom Gimel Chaf Aleph Shvat Taf Reish Chaf Tet 1869. Okay, and then it continues Hashem Yigadlehu LeTorah uLeChuppah uLeMaasim Tovim. The traditional greeting for the birth of a child. God shall raise him. He should be raised and dedicated to Torah study, to family, and to good deeds. Now, what was striking to us about this, although the colors are somewhat diminished, there are two things. One is that on the bottom portion are all the Zodiac signs. So that's part of this expression of art, Kabbalah, magic, whatever you want to say. The Zodiacs figured very prominently in design. You see it in early synagogues. I think some of you may know that from the synagogues, the mosaics in early Israel, 5th to 7th century, that are uncovered. So you do see elements of the zodiacs that played a role throughout our history. You see it I saw it in ceilings of synagogues in Europe. We don't have that in our experience, but it certainly was something that was part of people's consciousness. But to me, what was most interesting was this soldier up here. Does everybody see that soldier? See the soldier carrying the flag? It's a French flag. And I thought about this. What's it doing here? And then on top of good deeds, it shows the people sort of gathered in discussions around tables. Was it the celebration of the bris? What was going on? And I went back to the year is 1869. The Franco-Prussian War, 1870, 1869. Alsatian Jews making a statement. We're French. We want to stay with France. We don't want to be German. And they made their statement in a ritual object. So this is part of what I wanted to emphasize, which is cultural crossing. The boundaries in culture are porous. Influences of culture seep from one culture to the other. Very important. It's certainly true of religion as well, but we're so defended about the purity of our religion and about the mistaken nature of other religions that it's hard for us to admit that there are influences, but here it's contact produces some impact on your own culture. I don't know if people have any questions up till now. Maybe I'll take the questions later. Okay, so we have a little ark. Isaiah Horowitz, who lived in the 16th century, was a rabbi in Prague and then in Jerusalem, wrote a massive work. And in that work, he talks about the fact that if you have the opportunity, you should create a space, a spiritual space in your home. And he writes about people who have these huge homes. So he says, maybe you should downsize to just have a large home, not a huge home. And in every home, take a room and designate that room. People have workout rooms. Well, do they have prayer rooms? Do they have prayer space? So every day when I don't go to shul, which it hasn't been happening too much lately, this is my davening space in this corner, and here's an ark with a little Hasidic Torah that the Hasidic rabbis used to have little Torahs written for them so they can travel with them all over. All right, now I'm going to say some more about birth in a moment, and also before we leave the room, and I need to look at the time. Okay, we got to move. All right, this is a Kisei Shel Eliyahu. Most of you, can everybody hear me? Kisei Shel Eliyahu. This was used at a Brit Milah. We see here on one side it says Zeh Kisei Shel Eliyahu, and here it says Zot Briti Asher Tishmoru. This is my covenant that you shall observe and guard. Now, this is Alsatian. When we were in the museum in Strasbourg, there was an exact chair of this sort. So clearly it came from a similar workshop, and it found its way, fortunately, to our home. I mean, it was quite a trip that this Kisei Shel Eliyahu took. And Ashkenazim have 2 seats. Sephardim, Eidot HaMizrach, Eastern Jews only have 1 seat for the godfather. But what happens on a Brit is that the child is placed on a cushion. This is obviously a modern cushion on to the Eliyahu side, because we know that Eliyahu attends all Britot, and Eliyahu attends all the Britot because he has to atone for his sin of defaming the Jewish people. So his fate is that he has to be present at every Brit Milah. And then this is where the godfather would sit, or the sanda, the person holding the baby, would sit in the other adjacent and hold the baby for the circumcision ceremony. Now, this is a Torah crown. It's not something we weren't inclined to buying these large silver items, but this is a magnificent expression designed by a silversmith named Ludwig Volpert. Hopefully, I'll be able to show you a few of his pieces. He was the founder of the workshop, the Judaica workshop at the Jewish Museum. He studied at the Bauhaus. He came to Palestine. He worked in the Bezalel workshop, and then he came to New York City. What's so indicative and so emblematic of his work is his lettering. His lettering is magnificent. I'm sorry, I realize I can't spend as much time as I would like on all these items. I just want you to see what he did here with this Torah crown is around the circle, around the edge, represents each one of these sort of leaves. It depicts the symbol of a different tribe. So there are 12 of them, the 12 tribes of Israel, all brought together in the Torah itself. So there's a sense of unification in this beautiful object. This is a Moroccan Chanukiah, all right, in typical Moroccan style. As we move along, take my sheets, excuse me. Again, I'm sorry I can't comment on everything, but I did want to say a word about amulets. Okay, here we are. Can you see? Okay, here we are. Let me see it. Doesn't come. All right, so this is a birth amulet. Well, first let's look at this. This is a very famous amulet. This is actually from the 18th century, and it depicts Adam and Eve at the tree, and what's written on it is Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve, chutz Lilith, away with Lilith. So this amulet would have been hung over the crib of a newborn baby, a newborn boy. And it is a protective amulet to keep the dangerous demoness Lilith away from the child, because she is dangerous and she can harm the newborn who is vulnerable. Now, in addition to harming the newborn, we have also a different type of amulet. This amulet was rolled up and worn around the neck of a woman who is with child, carrying a child. And this is a protective amulet, also to protect against the demoness Lilith, who's depicted here with the three angels above, Sinoi, Sansanoi, and Semengalith, whose very presence or mention is a protection against Lilith, as we learn in basically some 9th century texts. But it dates back. There are Talmudic references, and there's one reference to Lilim, to demons in Isaiah. So we know this has deep Babylonian roots. The idea of a sort of an active demoness who attacks children. Some of you are familiar with a story about Lilith refusing to be recumbent to Adam, and sort of she is the again the embodiment of the independent woman, and the consequence of this independence is destruction. So this is not a good story. But Jewish feminists have redeemed Lilith. In other words, instead of focusing on the negative, what they've done is they've transformed and transvalued Lilith into a symbol for a constructive response and independence that has become an inspirational symbol to the new generation of women. And this type of amulet is interesting to me because it's like an encyclopedia of all the favorites. Yevarechecha. I mean, I can't spend all the time decoding it for you. Shema Yisrael is on it. Anything that could be protective is included in this amulet, including I think some sabers here, right? I don't know if I'm they attack Lilith. They can be used to defend against her. Okay, we're moving on. I'm sorry if I've missed anything here. An interesting object. This is a ketubah. Now, you're not accustomed to seeing a ketubah this way. This is from Tehran, from the 20th century. What's interesting about this form of a ketubah, it's a booklet. It's a booklet with about 6 pages, and we know that Muslims used to write their marriage contracts in these little booklets. Another example of cultural borrowing. We designed the ketubah in the same way that our neighbors did, and with the same sort of artistic expression. I do have a other ketubot from Iran, but I'm sorry that we don't have time to see them all. In this room, I think what's significant and what you need to see is the tallit. Okay, so this is an Italian tallit. The tallit is dated to 1725. We think that it comes from the Montefiore family. I'm not sure how clear the photo is, but that you see. But what's important is the embroidery. If you can look at how rich the embroidery is. Usually we keep this covered because, as you can see, that when we got it, it was already faded. But there's embroidery all over on the white section here, on certainly on the blue you can see it, and it's just a beauty. It's embroidered with flowers, floral decorations, and this is a uniquely Italian mode of devotion. And I must say that over the years we've become admirers of the Italian aesthetic and how it's influenced, how it was integrated into Jewish life. And it also reflects the fact that the Italian Jewish community was open literarily and artistically to their surrounding culture. Even though it was a Catholic culture, there was a very creative engagement with the surrounding culture. So that's one of the items. This is, amidst the forest here, is a Yemenite women's head covering with some of the jewelry that might be used at a wedding. These items were shared. Jews and Muslims used similar items. I don't know if they were literally shared, but the forms were shared. This type of veil is reflective of the Yemenite culture itself. And this also is a groom's coat from from Tbilisi, from the Pinchasov family, from Georgia. And the groom would appear in this beautifully decorated coat under the chuppah at the wedding. Okay, we do have a few. I'm gonna go on for 5 more minutes, and then we'll take some questions. This is a ketubah from Bologna from the 19th century, about 1840. You can see here what the pomegranates, beautiful pomegranates, right? Filled with abundance as a blessing for fertility. This, by the way, is an Italian amulet that would be hung over a crib. There are a number of those. All right, we'll move into the room just to see a few items of silver. This is a Seder plate. It was made by Boaz Yemini. Boaz Yemini is one of 3 generations of Yemenite artists who worked at Bezalel. And as you can see, the Seder plate uniquely printed, what he did was he engraved the words, the names of the items on the Seder plate in Rashi script, which is wonderful. And the leaves giving expression, even a cutout to nature. Nature itself is integrated into the Seder, into the spring, reflected in the Seder plate that we use. Just as a very sort of interesting curiosity item, this is a matzah rattler. A matzah rattler, and it's actually made out of ivory, but it does say on the handle, Pesach matzah maror. It's Italian, and it would be used to roll the grooves into the matzah itself. So this is the groover, that would be used for that purpose. All right, let me say a few words about some items of silver, and because I want you to know the names of the artists. So all of these items were made by someone named Oded Davidson, who has a Jerusalem workshop. He's still working in that workshop, and these are things that he's produced over the years. He obviously has produced many more. This is a tzedakah box. It's a magnificent tzedakah box because it tells the story of Jonah and the whale. Jonah is thrown overboard. You can see the figure of Jonah. Here the whale is where the tzedakah is inserted. The declarations here are teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, repentance, prayer, and tzedakah. They remove the evil decree. And around the base of the tzedakah box is the whole story of Jonah. On each side is another aspect of the story of Nineveh, etc. It's so whimsical and wonderful, and just to see what type of an artist he is. These are his Havdalah. Some of the, one expression of his Havdalah items. This is this little box here. It's a theater. It's the spice box. What a wonderful idea! Havdalah is theater. This is the candle holder with the three stars and the people standing outside and the greeting the new week. And these were sort of special commission that Doreen ordered for me for my 40th birthday, I think it was. I don't remember that far back, but these are the tefillin boxes that I use them. I had to use some different covers today, but there's a dedication here to the family. It makes, for the tefillin are items that are as close to me almost as anyone, because I wear them every single day. And the idea that these tefillin are sort of beautified with these covers, it indicates something of a special significance. And also the fact that there is this dedication is also its transmissibility from generation to generation. That's really important in the terms of some of these ritual items. I have my father's items, and we can pass them down. That's a connection. It's a very deep connection. I see that I must go through this more quickly, just so that you see, and then I'll take some questions. I mentioned the Gallery of Moriah. This is an item that was produced by the gallery owner, Peter Ehrenthal. It's a grogger. On one side, it depicts Haman leading Mordechai on the horse. On the other side, Haman hanging on the tree, right? And the serpents, and it actually works. This here is a traveling Hanukkah menorah, and we use it for oil and wicks. I'm not going to open it all up to you. And I wanted you to see some of Wolpert's other work. This is Wolpert's Eliyahu cup. There's a story related to that too, but I don't have time to tell you that. And this is Wolpert's bread plate, challah plate. The plate has inscribed Mazon v'tzeidah hezbiel l'nafshenu, food and sustenance. You have fulfilled us and our souls. And there's a wooden. Can you still see? And then finally, what I want to show you among the silver, this is made by Oded. This is the way Oded's thinking. This is a cup, a hand washing cup with hands that you hold on to, and Su'idechem Kodesh, lift up your hands in holiness to wash before eating the meal. Last things that I'm going to show you. All right, just a few items. This piece here, it looks like it's blank. This is a techina. It's a petition. We light it every Friday before candles. It's a woman's petition in Yiddish. It was written by Sarah Bat Tuvim. She was the most famous of the writers of women's prayers. And in this particular prayer, the woman is compared to the high priest in the temple who lights the menorah. That's why you have a 7-branch menorah. That's the Temple Menorah with 2 Shabbos candles raised from the menorah. And we have it lit all Shabbos for us, and the rest of the week it remains are a couple of ketubot. This is a ketubah from Ein Kona in early 19th century. What's interesting about this ketubah, the woman who was married, her name was Victoria, and the ketubah artist depicted victory without clothing. So the rabbis didn't hesitate to accept the ketubah even with this form of artistry. And when we talk about cultural exchange, the impact of the surrounding culture, so that victory was depicted as an image on a basically a religious document. This ketubah here in this corner, this ketubah is Moroccan, early 20th century, written by a famous scribe named David El Khayyam, who actually stamped his name on the ketubah. And I'm sorry, I'm getting another call. 1 second, just got rid of it. And what I want to mention about this ketubah, El Khayyam included a clause that we don't have in most of our ketubot, in almost all, and that is that if the man wants to move to a different city, he first needs the permission of his wife. Now, this particular man was so enchanted with his wife that, and we have this in this writing that's not legible, but we know what it says, that he added a clause that the ketubah, increasing the amount of the ketubah as an expression of his love. So you see the creative nature of these objects. They're not, even though the text may be fixed, it can still be enhanced, it can still be enlarged, it can still express something personal. That's what we need to preserve. The idea that we perform the rituals, these are the same rituals that have been performed for centuries, but we add our own touch to it. We make them into our own. I am out of breath, and I think maybe I'll stop here. If I have some time, I'll say some more. We do have a few minutes for questions. So anybody who has a question, please.
I have a question.
Please, yes.
Shalom.
What is your name?
Alicia Magal. You may remember me.
I know you, Alicia.
Yes, I was for 7 years the museum educator at the Skirball Museum before it moved up the hill, when it was still at AQC downtown. And I'm so delighted not only to see you and hear you and see your collection, but to be reminded of what we used to call at the museum adaptation retention. So the Jews, as you beautifully said, adapted from the cultures in which they found themselves, the styles, the ornamentation, the colors, the architecture, and also retained. So adaptation, retention, retained the ritual and the form, like the ketubah. The language is the same, but the format is so different. And the Wolpert silver and everything that you've shown just really reminds me of those many years that I trained docents to lead groups through the museum, and the prototypes that I helped create back in the 80s and early 90s before the big skirball was built. So
Right.
hello to you and kol hakavod.
Thank you.
Beautiful presentation.
Thank you for your comment. Now, I just reminded me, this ketubah is Italian. Now, what do you see about this ketubah? The colors in the ketubah are the colors of the Italian flag. Again, the ketubah artist identified as an Italian, and so did the couple, and they wanted to express that in the artistry of their marriage contract. I think it's wonderful. This, by the way, just so that you have a sense, this is David Moss's creativity. If you look at it, it looks like a bunch of Chinese letters. But if you look at it from the side, if you read it from the side, it says Chacham, Rasha, Tam, and Shin Yud Lamed Shein Yud Lishkol. All right, so that's typical Moss ingenuity, creative ingenuity. Any other questions? If there are no more questions, and I have a couple minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some books. All right, because you should see something that I think is relevant, and most important maybe is Moss's. They have an idea of Moss's Haggadah. So Moss's Haggadah is available. It's a commercial copy is available to this day from Beit Alpha. If you need information, contact Shmuley and I'll send you the information. And I think you can get them somewhere between 125 and 200. It depends on which example you choose. I'm not sure any longer.
Now these are replicas.
Well, those are, yes, they're facsimiles. Now,
yeah, okay.
But they're mass-produced facsimiles.
Understood.
They're printed. This is a facsimile that was artistically reproduced, so that there was a lot of care for the paper, for the design, for the gold leaf, and also for the cuts. I want to show you just a few pages to see what a creative artist does. So this is the title page of Moss's Haggadah. The title page is made like the cover of a picture album, right? With those corners in which you used to insert the photo. Now, what has he done? The centerpiece is a tree of life with 10 branches. There are 10 branches, 10 sfirot, 10 expressions, 10 emanations that connect us to the divine. Now, the 10 sfirot, as presented here, also have a lot of pomegranates hanging from them, because the pomegranates are symbols of mitzvot and of the abundance of opportunities to praise God. But what he's done with the tree is he's designed it in such a way that it has 7 upper branches, 7 branches reaching upwards, and 3 branches that are the base.
Go in closer. Could you go in closer for that?
Yes.
Yeah. And up
so
a
the 3
bit.
branches. So this is the Temple Menorah, 3 branch base, 7 branch menorah. What has he given us? He's told us and taught us something. The menorah is a stylized tree, and nature itself is transformed into an abstract idea. That's part of the sort of the Judaic polemic that against nature worship itself. But nature is preserved implicitly, and it's up to us to recover the dimension of nature that may have been lost from our religious life. Now, what's fascinating about what he's done here that I think is hard for you to see is that around the edges of the page, in micrography, which is microscopic writing, he's written the text of the entire Haggadah.
Wow.
It's the text of the earliest. It's the earliest Haggadah that we have from the Geniza, and it's short. It's shorter than our Haggadah, but it's the whole Haggadah. Why? Because when you have the germ of an idea, it's all contained in that kernel. The kernel contains already the outcome. We say it on Friday night in the Chadodi, Sof Ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. The end of the action was in God's thinking to begin with. Shabbos was the purpose of creation itself. And here, so the idea is right here at the beginning. Title page contains the whole thing. It's wonderful. All right, I can only show you a few pages here, so I will choose some of my favorites. Excuse me.
Can you show the mirror?
That's what I'm doing.
Oh,
The
okay.
mirror. So
Ki'ilu.
this is Bechol dor vador chayav adam lerot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. So we have here mirrors, and the mirrors are inserted in between humans who are presented in their period costume, men and women. So
Love
you
it.
see yourself reflected in every generation. Wow, you are part of every generation. Finally, what I'm going to show you is this, Psalm 114. Now, Psalm 114, he's drawn 600 figures corresponding to 600,000 Israelites who were redeemed from Egypt. Now, he's drawn the figures on musical staff. There's a musical staff. You can feel the lines. There are lines drawn across the page. Each figure is a note in a Hasidic tune for Psalm 114. So they actually, you know the song "Whistle While You Work." The people are singing as literally they embody the song as they sing. So this is just a taste of Morse's creative genius that I wanted to give you. And the only other book that I'll show you is this is a one volume of the first edition of the Talmud that was printed by Daniel Bomberg in Venice in 1520. What's important about Bomberg's Talmud is the following. Number one, the typeface. This is a typeface that he banged out, right? They created this typeface. It's a beautiful typeface. And for centuries after Bomberg closed his printing press, the type was used again in Amsterdam. It was used in all the best presses. And some of the books that you can see, it says, even though printed 100 years or 200 years later, it says Otiot Bomberg, with Bomberg's letters. Now, the most important thing that he did was he wasn't Jewish. He and his rabbinic printer who worked with him to set the text, they fixed and standardized the Talmudic page. So after Bomberg, anyone who studied Talmud knew that tractate Shabbat, page 115a, they can look up such and such a passage, because in every Talmud that was printed, this page 115a was the same, with the same design and the same structure. So Bomberg is responsible for the standardization of our Talmud, to be continued in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rav Chaim, for opening up your home and your Judaica. I see one last question here. What was from Lauren Blatt? What was the name of the Haggadah and what was the date? She asked.
The Haggadah I just showed them?
Lauren, you want to clarify?
Yeah, the Haggadah that you just showed. I didn't
Yes.
know the name of it,
It's
where
the
it
Mos,
was from, or the
it's,
date.
it's the Mos Haggadah, M-O-S-S.
M-O-S-S?
Yes, in Hebrew, he calls it Shir HaMa'alot LeDavid, the Song of Ascent for David. And it was, I think, he completed it in 1988. But you might, if you want to get in touch with Beit Alpha, you can look it up on their website, BEITALPHA, or BET. I'm not sure. It could either be BET or BEIT. There's an office in San Francisco. He lives in Israel, but he maintains an office in Berkeley.
So much great stuff here, Rav Chaim, on Jewish history and Jewish art and Jewish philosophy and the diversity of Jewish culture, and the reminder that Judaism doesn't encounter external cultures. We exist within them. We exist within them. We don't just encounter them, and to see the richness of that engagement. So thank you so much for this gift today, and wishing everyone good health and strength today. And hope you'll join us every day for Jewish learning, but especially tomorrow. We have a session with Rabbi Adina Lewitz on requiring Brit Mikvah for female trans converts. So
very good.
Yeah, good. All right, something very new. So we hope you'll
very helpful.
Listen, I thank you all, and stay well, and take care of yourselves, and stay well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and Lauren Cohen Fisher tomorrow, early Zionist approaches to the existing Arab population. Very interesting. And Rabbi Avi Strasberg next week, from flood to rainbow. Have a great day. Thank you all so much.
Shalom, shalom.